Hello, all the students of class 8. How are you? Once again, I am in front of the screen to teach you the next chapter in your additional book named as It So Happened. It is lesson number 3 named as The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wilde. His full name is Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde. Was an Irish poet and playwright. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, he became one of the most popular playwrights in the early 1890s in London. So this was a little about the author named as Oscar Wilde. Now let's introduce the story, The Selfish Giant. Oscar Wilde's short story, The Selfish Giant, has been enjoyed by generations of children as a fable about selfishness and redemption. Selfishness may be clear, but let me clear too. Selfishness means thinking about oneself, himself, herself is called selfishness. Redemption. Redemption is noun. It formed with the word redeem. Redemption means freedom from life, or also we can call it as salvation. In Hindi we call it mukti. Actually, this story, the selfish giant, got freedom from his life, from this world, as once he did something very good, and later on he repented over the mistake that he did. Actually, the mistake was that he stopped the children playing in his own garden. So now let's introduce the story, or the summary of this story, The Selfish Giant. Well, once upon a time, there lived a giant. He had a beautiful garden. It had soft green grass and 12 peach trees. Peach, do you know the meaning of a peach? Peach is a kind of fruit, a downy fruit. Downy means ruedar in Hindi, or hairy. Downy or hairy, juicy fruit with sweet, yellowish or whitish pulp. Pulp, you know means pulp or flesh. Pulp means guda in Hindi. Okay? Well, the giant had a beautiful garden, and his garden was full of soft green grass and 12 peach trees. School-going children used to visit to play there in the evening when they came back from the school. The giant had gone to see his friend named Cornish ogre. Ogre is a word, and it denotes or focuses at giant or devil, or a kind of giant who likes to eat human beings. called ogre. So once this selfish giant had to go to see his friend named as Khanis ogre, and he stayed there for 7 years, and it was a long span. When he came back from there, he stayed in his castle. Actually, he had a vast castle, and to his surprise, he saw the children playing in his beautiful garden, and he could not stop himself, saying that this is my garden. You cannot play here. He said, my garden is my own garden. And he built a high wall round his garden. Then he put up a notice board declaring that trespassers will be prosecuted. Trespassers means persons who enter someone's area forcibly or without his or her permission, called trespassing, or the trespassers who do the same, called trespassers. So he hung a board, trespassers will be prosecuted. Prosecuted means followed up or pursued, or some legal action would be. If you didn't stop, if the children didn't stop, or someone, maybe someone else, did not stop himself entering his beautiful garden without his permission, action would be taken. So he hung such a board, and it was written that trespassers will be prosecuted. The giant was a selfish giant, no doubt, as he didn't allow the children to play. So he was a selfish giant who only thought about himself. Now the children felt very sad. They had no place to play. So they played outside the garden, round the wall. The children remember the times when they enjoyed in the garden, in the giant's garden. There was no spring when the giant refused to let them play. Even the natural things like spring, summer, and all stopped visiting his garden. But outside his garden, these all were coming at the right time according to the season or weather. But in the giant's garden, neither spring nor summer visited. Only winter visited his garden. His garden was full of winters. And because of winter, there was a state of frost also. Actually, the giant wondered as to why there was no spring in his garden. Well, once the giant lay in his bed awake. He heard a sweet music. A little linnet, a bird, sang outside his window, and its music appealed to him. The sweet smell of flowers passed through his nostrils. He saw the most wonderful sight. Children had crept in through a hole. What was that wonderful sight? He saw the children crawling into his garden. And children later on sat on the branches. The trees were covered with flowers. In the farthest corner of the garden, a little boy was sitting. He was too small to climb on the branch. He was crying bitterly. When the giant saw the little child so helpless, he picked him up and placed him on a branch. Now the giant knocked down. Knock down means cause to come or go down. In Hindi, niche gira diya. Now the giant knocked down the garden wall. He felt sorry for building it. When children saw him, they ran away. Actually, they were frightened of the giant. The little boy kissed the giant. He called out the children and said, "It is your garden. Come and play freely." Actually, the giant felt sorry for it. He repented over his mistake in the form of denying the students playing in his garden. Many years passed. The giant had become old. He could not play now anymore. One day, suddenly, he saw the little child, the same child whom he had placed on one of the branches of the tree. He saw the same child once again. And as you know that, he loved this child too much. This child was so beautiful. At this, actually this child was so beautiful and he could not stop himself, and he went downstairs and walked near him. He replied. However, he felt angry to see his wounded palms and feet. On asking who had wounded him, he replied, "These are the wounds of love." At this, the giant fell on his feet. "I will let you play in my garden, which is paradise," that beautiful child said to the giant. Actually, when the giant met this beautiful child whom he had allowed to play in his garden, again, this child had his palms and feet full of blood. Actually, his palms and feet were bleeding. When the giant saw that beautiful child in this condition, he was very angry. He asked the child, "Who did this all? Tell me. I will kill him." But the child said, "These are the wounds of love." As the giant had allowed this child to play in his garden, the child said, "As you had allowed me to play in your garden once, I will let you play in my own garden, that is paradise." Next evening, when the children came to play in his garden, they saw the giant lying dead. Actually, the giant's soul, the giant's spirit, was carried away in the paradise by this beautiful child. Actually, this child was not or merely a child. He was a kind of, we can say, the messenger of God, or like a demigod. Okay, so the giant felt that whatever he had done earlier was not good. He repented over it, and because of his repentance, he got salvation, redemption. This was the extract of this chapter. Now, what you have to do? You have to go through the whole story once again. It's a really very interesting story, and you have to go through it. Later on, you have to write difficult words of this chapter. When you go through this chapter in detail, definitely you will come across some of the words, difficult words, and you have to write them in a fair notebook. Later on, you will write down question answers yourself. You will try first. Later on, if you can, I will send you the question answers also. So please stay safe at your homes. Thank you. Goodbye.